Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We have an amazing panel today of women who are so near and dear to my heart. I'm going to introduce them one by one and then share the common thread in what we're here to talk about today. So first off, we have Rachael Maddox. She is a trauma alchemist, an author, and an educator, and also 100% witch, as she puts on her Instagram. We've got Nisha Moodley, who is a leadership coach and who midwives seasoned creators to unearth and birth their deepest work, and also my first coach. And then we've got Cara, Viana, teacher, healer, and the embodiment of playful spirituality with us as well. And the reason I've brought them all together, other than I love them all dearly, and they have such beautiful, intuitive, heart-led leadership, is that they're all moms. And so we're here today to talk about something that has been so incredibly alive in my world. And what I've been watching as someone who is not a mother yet, watching my colleagues, my friends, my sisters move through this beautiful initiation from maiden to motherhood. And in this case, the three women I have here had biological children, and I watched them each go through. I've known them as maidens and I know them as mothers. And I've seen the way in which their leadership has hugely transformed and really just deepened in their values. And so I brought them here because I want to talk about the importance of us looking towards moms and motherhood values as a compass for our leadership moving forward, ultimately. So welcome, everyone. So good to be with you all. So I spoke to this idea of crossing a threshold, right, from maiden to motherhood. And what I want to really start us off with in today's discussion is I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about your story, your journey, your experience moving from maiden to motherhood, with the birth of your first child, or maybe there was some other pieces as well that I'm not aware of that you might want to bring in, right? But as you were crossing that threshold, what did you feel really shifted in your values and subsequently really in your leadership? And just like what started to happen there as you were moving through that journey? So if there's anyone who feels really inspired to start, otherwise I'll just pick.
Start. So I gave birth to my first child right in between, like at the midway point between the 2016 US election and inauguration. And so like the rest of us, I got to watch this rising hateful rhetoric take over as a apparently popular and widespread aspect of our, way of thinking, being, and expressing in the US. And it was horrifying, and it was a wake-up call. And I know it wasn't a wake-up call for a lot of people, but for me, it was a wake-up call because I thought at least those things were like socially unacceptable. And yes, they exist. And I know there are people who think like that, but surely not that many. And it turns out it was more than 50% of the country that was maybe not aligning with those ideas, but at least aligning with some of the ideals that underpinned it and sort of swayed in that direction. And so, like a lot of people, I got ready for the Hillary party and was rolling around the house with my big belly and just the little ticker that was like 95 or whatever they were saying percent chance of winning that she had, and just watched it go like down, 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 down. And did that night just climbing in bed early, which might have been 11:30 p.m. or something, like completely confounded and heartbroken by what was happening. And so I think for me, like, motherhood and the catalyzation of my advocacy went hand in hand. And it wasn't that I didn't have any sort of advocacy before that. I just think that a few things happened. Like, one, pregnancy, my first pregnancy for me was getting in touch with rage. Like, before I had had my first son, if people talked about anger, I was like, or rage especially, I was like, that is so interesting. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is rage? Or like, what does that feel like? Why would you do that? Why would you bother with that? Like, you could just alchemize it and do a different thing. And so for me, a lot of times I would do what I call the compassionate bypass, which is I could really easily access compassion. And so if I felt anger, I would just end up feeling compassion and then kind of go into a place of sadness. And I felt like, oh, this is actually like quite evolved. And then it turns out that I had like 37 years of repressed rage and anger in my body. And so my pregnancy was like, that was just rippling out. And I was having this very powerful mirror of watching this election play out and all of that, to like, it was like a thing to push against. And so I had this rage that was coming out of me. And I also had a lot that was being stimulated in the out, in the out picturing of the world. And it was necessary. It was for me to go through that process personally. And it really activated my fire and, my passion to give voice to the things that I feel need change. And that I feel passionate about, just not personal interest, but like collective interest. And I also feel like there's something about being pregnant and being in the tenderness of postpartum years. And I think I want to just that this is my little PSA, like postpartum is years. Not because I was like, oh, it's like 3 months, the first 40 days or something, some other thing, but not years. And now I recognize it's years. But it's such a tender window of time. We're so permeable. We're so, the veils are very thin. And so I was feeling it all. And there was no way that I could look at any child and not see my child. There was no way that I could not feel like profound heartbreak and tenderness for anybody being harmed, because it was just like the idea of my children and other people's children just like dissolved. And I think that before then, I had that as an ideal. I had it as a conceptual thing. And I even grew up that way. My dad's side are immigrants. So I grew up in an immigrant family. And this is true for a lot of immigrant families. Like, there were always people sleeping on the couches. We were always making extra food and like taking it in yogurt containers to people's apartments. Like, it was just normal. We just took care of whoever. And there were people that we called cousins that it took me years, even decades in some cases, to be like, oh, you're not actually related to us. Got it. But like, it doesn't matter because they're cousins, we're family. And so even though I always had that collectivist communal thing in me, I feel like the window of pregnancy and postpartum broke down a lot of whatever walls were left, and had me feel like, oh, I feel fiercely protective of all children and vulnerable beings. And I feel it is both not personal and deeply personal. And so I can feel both. Yes, I don't have to crush in shame that it's my responsibility. All the bad things in the world are my problem. And also like, they're my problem. And so, yeah, for me, that's
Mm,
what went.
mm. Gathered like fierce protector, we energy. Like there was a lot of different things I was just pulling out in terms of the values that were already existent, but just like really amplified through this experience of feeling like everyone was your child in some way.
Yeah, I will say the other thing that really catalyzed is I really wanted to take my newborn baby to the Women's March in DC at the beginning of 2017. And thank goodness his dad was like, no. Like, we don't know what's going to happen there. It could end up being like horrific. And you just had a baby, you had a very difficult birth. You're still physically recovering. Even if I didn't have a difficult birth, would have still been recovering. And we have a newborn baby, like I'm a no to you doing that. And that helped me also to understand there are a lot of different ways to be on the front lines. There's not just one way. And that it helped me have a deeper understanding of leadership. Like sometimes our leadership is like, I got to be right here with this one and care for this one and this one. And that's like the biggest advocacy I can do in this moment. And it's not a turning away from or a shirking of responsibility. It's about orienting around what the deepest truth of my responsibility is in this moment. And, you know, we can approach that from like a series of mental gymnastics or just a knowing of the heart. And it helped me orient around the knowing of the heart of like, what is mine? So I think it also really deeply, I feel it also really, pregnancy and postpartum really deeply shaped my understanding of what leadership is, that it's not always the people right at the front, that it takes a collective and us all being in our own right action in our own right place, which is a dynamic thing, not necessarily a static thing. It will change moment to moment. But watching Standing Rock and seeing how the Indigenous folks organized there, at least from a distance, and getting a download of like, oh, okay, I see what collective action really looks like. And yes, the people at the front, on the front lines, they're in their own leadership. The people who are filming them and transmitting that to the world, they're in their leadership. The people that are in the back stirring soup and praying over it are in their medics. The people bringing supplies, like it takes all of us. And I think that was another thing that really got shaped for me during that time in my life. And I don't know that I might have kind of held, because my expression of leadership my whole life has been like class president, valedictorian, like very at the front. But to be sort of like, oh, I actually have to be like so in this little nest right now, was a big lesson for me.
Mm, mm. Beautiful. Thank you.
Love hearing your story, Nisha. Cara, how postpartum are you?
6.5 months.
Okay, so you're a month ahead of me. Maybe you go next.
So I'm very fresh, yes, in this. And I was sitting with this, particularly this leadership question through the night as I was up breastfeeding and soothing and doing the things. And I just kept butting up against this word, leadership. And it was like an outfit that didn't fit. And I kept trying to put it on because I'm like, I know what Nadia's trying, and like, I couldn't, then I just kept taking it off and taking it off and taking it. I'm like, doesn't know, it just doesn't fit. And I opened, sitting on the toilet this morning, you know, in your moment of quiet, the 9 seconds of privacy I had this morning. And I opened my phone really quick and I saw a message from a friend of mine who's in this industry. And we were having a beautiful back and forth with each other in support. And she happened to say something about maybe this is the collective shift that we're going through right now, is learning how to soften in to the heaviness while we bolster one another, arm in arm, while we lean when we collapse, and then bolster when we're solid, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in this fluid dance outside of, and she put it in quotes, leadership. And I was like, yes, this is what I've been butting up against, is I want to be leadership in quotes because it doesn't fit in my system. And this is not new to pregnancy and postpartum. It's something that I try so hard to ask for within my community, within when I'm teaching, everything else. Like, you all are getting the one thing that I am an expert at right here. It's what I teach them, the one thing I'm an expert at. But please always remember that I'm a human being and I'm total dog shit at a whole bunch of other stuff that you're amazing at. And please, please, please don't put me on a pedestal, because you will have to knock me down later. And it sucks. I don't want to get knocked down. I'm not asking to be on a pedestal. I don't need it. I don't want it. The only person I care about being on a pedestal for is me. I want to remember my own greatness. And I want to remember the greatness of every human. So in my mind, I see each one of us on all these little pedestals, which is effectively the exact same thing as no one on a pedestal. But I like the idea of us getting to stand on something that says we're special, but all of us. So I've been sitting with that through the night. And I've been like, well, how I show up in this leadership, what is different? It remains to be seen a little bit still in my work, because I am coming gradually back postpartum, and I can speculate and I can see some things. But one of the areas I started to take that word and dissect it a little bit, and I thought, what about self-leadership? What's different here? What's different in the leadership with me and my body? What's different in the leadership in my home, in our family? And there were some interesting pieces in there that I noticed. So is it okay if I bring those forward, even though they're a slightly off topic? I noticed the leadership between me and my body, which prior to pregnancy was very much my body leading and me following, and every once in a while me forgetting and butting up against, and her being like, sit down, bitch. We're gonna get a cold and you're gonna remember, and I'm gonna help you. And I'll be like, oh, right. Oh yeah, I forgot to check and follow you. Very lovingly, of course, and usually call me bitch. I say that because it makes me laugh. And since pregnancy and birth and postpartum, it's me falling to my knees in reverie again and again and again and again, just hero worship of my body and what she's done and what she's capable of. And then slipping into the like, oh gosh, that's weird. This is jiggly. That's different. Moments of insecurity. And then falling back to my knees again and being like, what am I talking about? Look what she did. Look what she's doing. Look what she's capable of. I didn't even comprehend the level of what is happening here. So there's very much a me sitting in the back seat and following in that way, in like hero worship. And then of course, falling into all sorts of criticism as well in the moments of humanness also. Within the family here and the structure of the family, I was reflecting and I was noticing there is simultaneously a really, really deep surrender and receiving of me having to say, all right, y'all are in charge. Our support structure and my partner, you guys are in charge. You're in charge of literally everything. And I've had to just hand over the reins again and again and again. And my mantra to myself is stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Your lane right now is mama. Your lane is not that the dishes are not put away in the right place in the kitchen anymore, or that your fancy wooden spatula spoon thing that you brought home from Greece and it means something to you, even though it's just a wooden spatula that everybody else got put in the dishwasher and it might fall apart. It doesn't matter. Stay in your fucking lane. like stay in your lane has been my mantra to myself, is like everything gets handled. My partner's doing all these amazing things. He's taking things off my plate left and right. So there's been that where it's like this deep surrender of receiving, which it took me years because I had to kick and scream through a lot of it. And then there's been this really, really, really potent Cara's fucking in charge simultaneously that's happening, where we've always been really good, he and I, at sharing, but it's gotten very like black or white in certain areas where he will say, all right, I've researched this, I've looked at this, here's thoughts, here's questions I have, all the things when we go to make a big decision that has to do with our baby. And then he says, but ultimately, Cara's the decider because she is connected to this baby and her intuition is 100% clear. And there is no doubt in his mind. And he will defer to me and say those words out loud to anybody who asks, like, and mom intuition will tell us exactly what to do. So there's been a very interesting shift there. But the piece that maybe is the coolest is how much Bodhi, my son, is in charge. Because I really firmly believe that in an ideal scenario, whoever's in charge of anything would be the person who's most in alignment in the moment. In our household, if there was a decision that needs to be made, oftentimes it goes the other way, right? It's whoever is the most upset. We defer to, like, they get to, but really the person who's most in alignment should be the one making that you're going to make the best decision. And who's the one who's most in alignment in our household most of the time? It's our baby. And I watch him as we're going through all of these, you know, Maui just went through the most devastating wildfire in US history. And the closest fire was 10 minutes from our house. And the island is very much still in a state of crisis. And I have watched him again and again and again and again, moment to moment, again and again and again, to me and to every human he sees, call us into presence and call us into alignment with one look. He looks and he lights up and the whole world falls away. And he calls you right here, right now, and he tells you everything that is important. And I watch him do it, and I swear he's enjoying it, because I watch him walk out into the world and I watch him do it with person to person to person to person. And it's like I'm watching people zing into their bodies and I'm watching all the priorities shift around them in that nanosecond of a moment. And they'll say, thank you to him. Wow, I needed this. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing him with us. And so I know it's not a coincidence for us to be here at this time and for this to have happened right after he was born. And I don't mean that in a big haughty, like, you know, again, he's not more important than any other baby. This is a thing babies do. They are so close to the divine. You know, they're just calling you right in there. You're looking at God right there. So answer to your question is leadership has shifted drastically, and in so many ways, he's leading the show. So I've taken a back seat, left, right, and center, with the exception of channeling that mom intuition. Like that's really my only job now. And everywhere else, I'm just following the alignment of the beings around me.
You know, there's a few things that I pull out of that feel so important to like punctuate, highlight, underscore, bold, etc. And that is that we still are all grappling with a particular flavor of leadership that we've seen over and over again. And therefore we have such an aversion sometimes to putting that on, because we think of leadership as this very particular version. And so part of this conversation and a lot of what you all are doing so beautifully is shifting the definition of what leadership is in the world. And it's also a remembrance. Like we all know we're actually just looping back to the ancient ways. And there's this way in which we moved so far away from divine love. And like you were saying with Bodhi, it's like the moms are the ones closest in connection to the children, and the children are closest connection to God. And so it's like it's this channel. And yet here we are looking at a lot of like sort of old dudes who in a certain way are the furthest away from that connection to God. And so that really stood out to me when you were sharing. Thank you. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think for me, a few things happened. The first is that actually for me, preconception was really transformative. I was having a lot of ruptured cysts in my ovaries and I wanted to get pregnant, and that wasn't adding up. And part of what was happening is I was running a company that was centered around personal and collective post-traumatic growth, which is a beautiful intention. But also when you're in the field of trauma resolution and you're talking about it and promoting it and what you're doing is you're attracting everyone who has a lot of trauma. And what that meant was there was a lot of unresolved stuff in my field constantly. And that often ended up resulting in a lot of projection, a lot of entitlement, a lot of immaturity. And it was like I had 100 children at all times that were wanting me to be their mom. And as much as I thought I had really like good boundaries, whatever that means, there was a way that I was not in that I was also playing a role of, okay, I'll be your mom. And in fact, when I first started in the field of trauma resolution, I had made a contract with God. I had had cancer and I raised my hand to God in the forest and I said, take my cancer, take my pain, and I will be the mother to all the secret bad girls, which was the name of my first book. And that started like a 7-year contract in the field of trauma resolution, like contract with God. And yeah, don't raise your hand to be the mother of any group of people. I mean, unless you really have like infinite chi and life force from multiple, whatever. So that was a really big job, and I was doing it, and I was doing it without the initiation into mother. And I think for me, the initiation into actual mother, like for me, what I realized was, oh, if I want to get pregnant, I can't have adult children anymore. No more adult children. Get off my tits. I gotta have a real baby. I gotta grow it in my body. I gotta have the resources and the capacity to actually tend more deeply to my own personal well. And so I closed that company, and the cysts went away, and I was pregnant the cysts went away in 3 months, and then I was pregnant 3 months later. And so for me, preconception was actually the beginning of the initiations into mother and away from my maiden tendencies towards like saviorship and whatever, that whole world of martyrdom. But what's really fascinating to me now, and I'm just like 5.5 months postpartum, so I'm still really piecing my world back together or renewing my world into something new. But I have a very clear inner conviction that I'm no longer here to be the mother to adult children. I can be a space where people who are still in emotional immaturity, they could come into the space, sure, but I'm not coddling emotional immaturity anymore. I'm here to hold a very firm line and container around who's responsible for who, because I have children to tend to. And also I have bigger fish to fry in the world than people's emotional immaturity that's unresolved. And that was a really hard, like, as someone who has, like Nisha, you were saying, like a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, a lot of skill, very, very skilled at working with people who have very intense challenges in their physiologies and histories. But I didn't have this very core muscle I needed, which was like your life, your body, your life history is completely yours. And in fact, you know, it's interesting, Nisha, because what you were saying was like, it feels like it kind of, your transition into motherhood, like it awakened your collective spirit more. And in some ways I feel the same, but actually like in this opposite sort of way, where
Mm.
if I'm going to really show up for collective liberation, I can't be dragged down by emotional immaturity. That's not collective liberation. Fuck that. Like getting into little like triangles of drama where someone's the victim, someone's the perpetrator, someone's the savior isn't actually collective healing. It's not and so I'm just like, my system's not available for that anymore, because I actually have bigger work to do, and I'm still really unfolding and uncovering what that's going to look like for me. So that was one piece. Like I really just was like, not playing that game anymore. I'm done with it. And it's caused a lot of, you know, conflict, and I'm okay with it. Like, I don't care. You don't have to like me. I'm done. Like, so that's one piece. The other piece is that when my husband and I got engaged, part of what happened is we were high in a hot tub and talking about legacy. And I just had this feeling that he's an environmentalist, among a million other things. But that our life's work together was really, that there was something that we were meant to do that would preserve water for 500 years to come. Like 500 years in the future, there could be clean water on planet Earth. Which, if you're an environmentalist, or if you know anything about what's happening in the climate, you're like, that's actually a really big intention. And it was in that moment, after like I painted this vision, that he proposed to me. And it was like, so sort of in the spell of our relationship is that we're very committed to being in service to the earth. And I think when you have big visions, you realize like how long they take, you know, like a vision that's 500 years into the future isn't going to happen fast. It's going to happen slow. It's going to happen with thought, with diligence, with deep, deep devotion. And when my son was born, I mean, just as soon as he was born, actually within the first few minutes of his birth, I just kept thinking like, I hope when he has a child, this like there's clean air and water. And so again, for me, there was something very specific that I thought that I can't remember now, but it was a little more poignant than that, but whatever. There's a real slowing down that's happened for me, even with my previous body of work. I think part of what was so like, I mean, I consider it sort of a success and a failure. I mean, I wrote this book, I had this big company, I was doing all this stuff, but I created from this maiden who was biting off more than she could chew and trying to do it faster than she should have. And now I feel like in Mother, I'm like, cool. Trying to like save the world quickly is a recipe for disaster on so many fronts. And I feel more devoted to our future as a human family, but also much slower in my approach and much humbler, honestly, much more like, you know, just like shit's gonna bitch slap you. Like your dreams are gonna like totally decimate you. Your visions for any big vision is gonna totally decimate you. So be prepared. And what do you want to be decimated by? And what do you not want to be decimated by? Like, what are you like? I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm going to do this one or whatever. So yeah, so for me, it's been really like, what is my responsibility? What is others' responsibility? Actually, like untangling from some of the maybe over coupling with others in certain ways, and slowing down so that I can anchor into a new body of work that's still very unknown and emerging.
So good. Slowing down for more sustainability. It's just like what keeps coming up as you were talking. And there's this curiosity that I have as I was hearing you all share your experience as someone who's not cross the threshold, at least not through actual pregnancy. For people like myself who might be listening in and watching this, do you guys feel like there is a way that we can start to shift into this energy, even though we are not actually officially crossing that threshold? So I'd be curious to hear a little bit about that and talk about it all together, because it sounds to me like all of these values of like removing yourself from the spotlight, or I mean, sometimes you might be in the spotlight, but that's not necessarily 100% what leadership is only about. So like really getting clear on like, what is your role in the whole circle and in the web, getting clear on how can we most closely be connected to God / be in alignment. And then also the pace at which we're doing it, slow and sustainable. So if we want to start to adopt these as someone like myself, who is where I am in life, just curious what you think about that. Or is there something that is just so specific to birthing that we just have to wait?
I can speak to this. I feel like there are phases of life that bring different things. So it's like in a period of life, like grinding and like working on my projects and getting by on very little, staying up super late and dancing and, just, it's like, that was totally great and appropriate and fine. There was not a problem. It was not imbalanced. And I could then like sleep until noon on a Saturday. Cool. So I just want to give grace for like, there's so much when you're a mother, especially with small children, that there's a lot of Groundhog Day thing going on, because you need to titrate and preserve energy where you can. And like, it's, you're running a marathon every day. And so you need to rest deeply every day. You can't run a marathon and then pull an all-nighter, scrolling on Instagram without seriously paying for it when you have to run a marathon again tomorrow. When you're in a different phase of life, something different is happening. So I think that for me, it's less about like taking the wisdom of what somebody might be going through pregnancy or postpartum or matrescence, or even archetypally moving from maiden to mother, and then like applying that to every person. I think the biggest thing is like, what is the wail of the mother? Like, what is the cry that I'll speak to? Like, what is the cry that I hear from every new mother, which is like, where is the village? Where did it go? How did we get here? This is, even the mothers that I know who are like the most supported, like they kind of got the memo and had the resources to like have somebody cooking and the partner, and if they had the fortune or choice to have a partner with them, and like have like a grandma around, or like hired support. Like even the mothers who I know who are like the most padded, which is very rare. Like I don't even know what percent, but it's like micro mini. And it's not a choice even for most people, even if they did have the awareness that it was needed, which most people already don't. So even the mothers who I know that are the most padded are still like, where is the village? Because even if they're not suffering with it, they're like, how the fuck are people with less than this team of 8 or 4 or 3 doing it? And even the people who I know who struggled with like themselves and one partner, or themselves and their mom who then left 2 weeks later, or whatever it might, or even are like, how does a single mother do it?
Yeah.
How is this even possible? So I think what I want mostly is for people to hear the cry of the new mother, which is, where is the village? I mean, that from my listening, that's what I hear. Where is the village? And to respond to that call. And I think responding to that call is like, when we say, where is the village? It's like, both, where are the uncles, the aunties and uncles? Like, where are the others, the people who have more bandwidth, time, space, than we do right now? Because by the way, most new mothers have like text threads of other weary new mothers who are like, I don't have anything to give, but I'll give you what I've got. And here's the resource. And okay, we'll organize a meal train with the 7 seconds we have to ourselves today. And so I think that part of it is like a radical recentering of the most vulnerable. And if we all do a radical recentering of the most vulnerable, things will reorder. And I think that's a thing that I would say to anyone who is sort of at the precipice of crossing into the archetypal mother threshold, or is wanting to embody or live into more of the values of, let's say, matriarchal leadership. It's like, how do we do a radical recentering of the most vulnerable parts within us and beings in society? And let it change our lives, let it change our values, let it change how we show up, let it change how we spend our money and time and energy. And to me, that is the thing, is like, listen to the wail of those who are in the most vulnerable. And if we listen to the wail of those who are the most vulnerable and let it reorder things for real inside of us, and you know, in our way of moving and being, and even just thinking about like the way that cities and towns are usually constructed, where like there's gaps between houses, even fences and streets. And it's like we've lost like communal spaces. And so when we start, I just think about the possibilities of when we start centering the most vulnerable, how we go, you see these beautiful projects. I saw this amazing project that sprung up, I don't remember where like 6 neighbors that sort of like, they were fenced and fences between all of the houses, and it was 3 houses on one side and 3 houses on another street, and they broke down all the fences and made their yards a giant communal space, gardens and bees and children's playground and all of this stuff that just 6 households decided, we're going to revillage. And they did it. And that shit can happen. We can fucking do that, you know? And like, okay, I rent, so like I might not be able to actually bust down the fence, but I can certainly like knock on the door next door and be like, you have a lawnmower, we don't. Can we borrow your lawnmower? What do you need that we might have? Like these little but actually big ways that we can start reordering, that I think this incredible well of creativity opens up when we focus on the centering of the most vulnerable.
Radical recentering of the vulnerable. I love this so much, and it feels so important in our communities and the way that our societies are structured, right? Our living spaces. And I'm curious, I'm just going to add in to the conversation as we continue to go around. I also want to bring this into our online communities, right? So we all in some shape or form are working with communities virtually in leadership, mentorship, coaching, wellness, etc. And so I would also love to add that into the discussion, like how can we start to bring in these values when it comes to the businesses and communities that we are shepherding and running?
I would love to pick up that ball if I could, Nisha, that you just brought up, because it's what it's been echoing for me, and you put it so eloquently. And I think that because I've been in that whale, and I was so very blessed to have had the nudge and gotten it at the last minute, the education of like, oh, you're going to need so much more fucking support than you realize. And called in the very best that we could, like truly. And still, my partner said it great. He said, I used to think I was tough. You're like, what's father? Like, he's like, I used to think I was tough. And I mean, he has lived if you know him, you're like, that motherfucker is tough. No, he's like, I am a candy ass. This is humbling. This has broken me, truly. And that's with the support. And we are the ones like wailing, how is anyone doing this? This is so fucking huge and all encompassing, and the best, most fun thing we've ever done in our lives. And I've been sitting with like, what is it that needs to shift collectively to get us back to that. And I think the piece that we're missing is that we don't value this. It is not something that we collectively, I've said my whole life, we all say it. Motherhood is the hardest job. It's the hardest job. We know that. But where are we valuing it? Where are we saying, like, you just brought forth the divine into human form? And you said it, Rachel, when you said legacy. We don't, in this country, we don't think about or care about legacy, and we don't think about or care about ancestry, not to the degree that we used to, right? And so because of that, we're also not thinking about creating new generations, and we're not carrying us forward. And if we were living collectively as village, tribe, community, that would matter, right? New young people coming on to do the new young people things would matter. And because we don't, we're missing that piece now. You know, we're beginning as a species to head towards what would be an inevitable extinction if we stayed on the track we're on of this rapid decline. And I think that the one thing that would have to shift is that we begin to value, we care about, because if we did, then all of a sudden that recentering you're talking about would happen, because we would be like, oh, you're pregnant? Let's all run in to be a part of this really fucking cool thing that's happening. And let's support and say, like, great, how do we take pressure off? And how do we be up in this energy around you? Because it's so beautiful what's happening right now. And I've been shocked at, for us, the journey of getting to be parents was a long one. And so my profound desire to be fully present in this experience is very, 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 very heightened. And as I'm sitting in the deep presence of the experience of pregnancy and the experience of birth and motherhood, I'm sharing about it really, really in like nitty gritty detail with those in my sphere. And I've been shocked at how many people have said, wow, I learned so much about this. Thank you so much for letting us see this and be part of this with you. And I learned so much about it. And what blew my mind the most is it was mothers, the people who, you know, it was men too. It was lots of people saying this to me, but it was also people who were like, I fucking have 3 kids. And I learned more about pregnancy by what you shared than me going through it 3 times, because you got so, like, you digested it so much that you could put it into words, that you could share it. And I got to witness and hear that from you. And I think we're missing, because we're not valuing it and seeing it as this amazing thing, we're missing the ability to learn from and experience it without walking through it, which is absolutely doable. You know, there are lots of things in life that we get to stand beside someone and see them do and learn and get benefit from without going through it ourselves. And we could do that here 100%.
Yeah, that's such an important piece for sure. It's, yeah, there's just so much too in, you know, there's just like I keep thinking about the bullshit meter. For some reason it pops up for me too, like just throw that into the mix, keep adding layers here. But there's something that happened, and I witnessed it for all 3 of you, but then also some other people who I was, you know, tracking and following their journey, where there's something that happens with motherhood where suddenly you're like, I just like what Rachael was talking about, like, I'm not going to entertain this shit. Like, for lack of a better way of saying it, like, I'm just not, this, nope. That was, and I think so much of also just bringing it back to the coaching industry, because it's such an easy access industry, right? Like, anyone can come in, there's no regulation, you can be certified, not certified, doesn't really matter. There is a lot of young folks who are coming in who are like, great, I'm a coach, I'm, you know, 22, 23. And PS, I have no problem with young, like, I don't think that a young person necessarily cannot coach. I know some people give the young ones a lot of shit, but I feel like I was in relationship with a very young life coach for a while, and he was absolutely fantastic at what he did and had no certification. So I'm not, shitting on that, but I think that there's something that happened to the industry where there was such an influx of young energy that came in, and with that, the values of, social media and how we center ourselves instead of, centering the vulnerable, or where if we posted, any of us posted a photo of, say, it's like a beautiful landscape, nature, like that's really what we should be centering, right? But like, what happens? The algorithm's like, nah, there's no person in here, we don't like it, right? So then we have to continue this lead, take selfies, and anyways, I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but the point being that there was this like very interesting influx of energy that feels very maiden and young, that is such a big part of the coaching industry, in particular when Instagram got really big, right? Because I think all of us we've been around pre-Instagram, running our businesses pre-Instagram. And there really was this rise of the influencer coach, who often is, not always, but often is maiden. Also because they happen to know how to use Instagram better than the rest of us. But anyway, so I don't know. I just wanted to throw that into the mix with everything else we're talking about. And because we're complex beings, I think we're holding all the layers pretty well. So, all right, I'm going to take a seat back and see who else has some things to say.
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, I love what you're sharing, Nadia. I think part of what, your original question was like, how can those of us who haven't gone through the biological transition into mother, live into some of the values of mother? And I really love what both Nisha and Cara have shared. And I think part of what is a shame is that specifically in the US and in just like Western individualist capitalist culture, we're in these like every person for themselves systems. And those systems don't in any way, shape, or form. I mean, like in the United States of freaking America, one, we don't have health insurance, universal health insurance. So the cost of birth and postpartum and taking off work. Okay. And then two, we don't have postpartum leave for moms, let alone partners. I mean, it's horrific. So our culture as a whole, our society, our systems, like Cara said, don't value the most vulnerable, which is new mothers. Secondly, I don't think as a culture we position new mothers as vulnerable, even though we absolutely are. Like hearing Nisha, you say the most vulnerable. I mean, as a maiden, I didn't think new moms were the most vulnerable person. I knew like, oh, I hear the message, the memo, we're supposed to show up with food. I had this one friend a few years ago, had a baby. You know her, Caitlin and Mark. They had their baby. And I was like, I'm such a good friend. I've cooked twice in 6 months and like brought over food. And she's 6 months postpartum. And I'm like we're trying to get together. And she like for 6 months, I've only gone to her. And I'm like, come on, just come over for dinner. Like, what's the big deal? Like, I don't understand bedtime. I don't understand nap cycles. I don't understand what a pain in the ass it is to take your 6-month-old.
They can sleep on my couch.
Yeah, like what's the big deal? Like the baby will be fine. No, I had no fucking clue what babyland is. And that's the biggest thing that I see with like my friends who are maidens, even friends who I'm like telling the entire thing to. I have one friend who's apprenticing to become a mom, and I call it apprenticing to become a mom because that's what she's doing. She's doing a great fucking job. She's like, I want to be a mom. I want to learn every single thing about what's hard, what's good, what's da 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 da. And she is showing up. She's the friend of mine who has shown up the best because she's like, I'm going to be in your spot probably in the next year or two. And I want to learn everything I can so I'm not like totally flooded when it happens. And the folks who are not yet actually apprenticing to become mothers are not doing that. They're in the maiden mentality, which it's a shame that in our culture, the maiden mentality is, I'm the most important thing. Because I have a doula, Jasmine Rose on Instagram. I don't know what shirt anyway, she doesn't like put her last name out there. Jasmine, and she's epic. And her whole thing is like the maiden sits at the foot of the mother and serves. The maiden has more energy. The maiden cooks and cleans and takes the baby so you can rest instead of the other exhausted mother, auntie. right? But we have a broken system. We don't understand. One, we're disconnected from one another, and everything's happening in silos of privacy and individualism. And so then two, the maiden doesn't know that that's her role. And not only is it her role because like she's indebted because she's the maiden and she has more energy, but it's how she becomes a mother without it being traumatic. It's how she comes into her next role, whether she does biological birth or not. It's how she learns to be supported, to receive what she needs, to be somebody who takes her turn when it's her time, to be birthing something big, to call in all of the support, whether it's a child or a project or whatever. So it's a disservice to the maiden that she doesn't understand that her role is to sit at the foot of mother, to apprentice to the mother. It's a disservice to her that she doesn't know that. So I think like Nadia said, or not Nadia, Nisha said it, that like it's not about the maiden like taking on, or the non-biological mother or whatever, taking on the values of mother. It's about playing your role more powerfully. Your role is to have the energy, to have the extra time, to have that daring, brazen, fuck it, let's do this, all of those things. But your role is also to be in service to the mother. And I think that the problem is that that's not taught, that we don't understand the cycle and where we belong inside of it. And it's just a total disservice to everyone. And then I think in terms of like the Instagram or the coaching culture or whatever, like the industry we're in, I had a client, whatever, she listens to this, she'll hear it, good, she needs to hear it. A client be like, just so you know, I get really triggered if I'm working with a mom and like the baby interrupts or something. And I'm like, and this person was like trying to get pregnant. I'm like, you're gonna get the biggest bitch slap ever, because like, no, as a culture, all three of us, Cara, Nisha, I am the breadwinner of our family. I don't know where you are, Cara or Nisha, but like I am doing full-time mom and working, and I'm not full-time mom. I'm doing full breastfeeding a newborn or a 6-month-old baby, 5 months, and working and not sleeping. And so our clients should give us grace. Fuck the capitalist, transactional nature of shit. No, if we're going to really be in community, even if it's in a community where you're paying me even good money to do a high-end service, do you believe in centering the mother? Because if you do, if I need to reschedule, you should fucking reschedule. Get over yourself. So I think that's part of how, as a community, we can be better, like to people who do not have young children, we can be better community to one another by understanding that, like, and if you haven't been in, I like to call it babyland because the baby takes over and you're now babyland. Like, if you haven't been in babyland, go spend some time in babyland and be like, wow, it's a 90-minute rhythm or a 2-hour rhythm forever for at least however many months. And then, it's a 3-hour rhythm. It's just a cycle that doesn't stop. And the mom or the parents, the caregivers, have to show up over and over without pause. So I'm sorry if something interrupts the thing, like, get over yourself, be part of the community, be flexible, because like that's what's needed. So
yeah.
Can I riff off of this a little bit?
Yes.
Is that okay? I love what you're sharing, Rachel, and to just riff off of what you shared about really owning our role, like being powerful in our role. I feel like because we live in this hyper individualist overculture, and I think in part, this is my like compassionate piece, I think in part because a lot of us don't get a childhood where we get to be children fully, that then we become like children in grown-up bodies. And also because for a lot of reasons, we become children in grown-up bodies. But when I think about like a functioning society, a functioning village, it should not be in a functioning village that elders need to worry about whether or not they're going to have food, whether or not they are going to be able to change the sheets that they just had an accident in, whether or not they're going to be able to keep the heat on in the winter. It should be that by the time we reach elderhood, there are people there to care for us, our needs are met, not just because of the labor of our own life, but because of community. And it should be that when you are in mother and you have a newborn baby, you shouldn't have to be worrying about keeping the lights on. It should be that if you're sick, you shouldn't have to be worried about having access to care. Like, it's all fucked up. And so I think part of powerfully owning our role is when we have less responsibility for other people, we take on more responsibility for other people. And we can take on that responsibility by taking on a collectivist mindset. And where this extends into the coaching industry is like, to be really fucking careful that we don't place so much emphasis on the power of the individual to determine all of the outcomes, circumstances, and experiences of their lives, or that the things they're dealing with are mindset issues or this or that, when actually we are complex webs of interconnectedness. And when I say we are complex webs of interconnectedness, I mean, as an individual person, I am a complex web of interconnectedness. I am the trauma histories, the gifts of my multiple lineages of ancestors. I am everything that I care about. I am my epigenetics. I am the gut flora in my belly and my brain. I'm woven in with all of it. And so this idea that like the inability or the struggle that someone is in to, make 6 figures this month is a mindset issue, completely is delusional. It's delusional. I'm just going to say it. It's delusional. It's not to say that there couldn't be some like beliefs in there, but that's like saying, it's like this little tiny tip of the iceberg. That's the iceberg. And it's like, it's the tiny tip of the iceberg. There's a whole other thing happening here. And so I think having the consciousness, the humility to acknowledge the truth that beings are complex and interconnected, that a person's challenge to make up 6 figures this month, sure, there might be some beliefs in there. There might also be some tremendous weight of responsibility that they're holding. There might also be, there can be a lot of freaking things. It can be that they're trying to make art that the math doesn't math right now, or there's some skill building that needs to happen, or. So I think there's a sort of immaturity as we race towards securing the bag in a way that isn't just about having our basic needs met, which we all should have, but having extraordinary volume so that we can hoard that, so that then we can buy a house, and then we can be ready, and then we can be secure so that we can have a kid, and I'm okay. But like, and instead, if we're like, wow, I actually don't have a lot of responsibility to a lot of people, that must mean that part of my job is to get responsible for a lot of people. And so if I'm going to make a whole bunch of money, let me be super mindful. I have nothing wrong with really great, make a bunch of money, but like, how am I doing it? Am I doing it through the lens of like, this is actually contributing to the kind of world that I want us to live into, that I want us to see, the kind of culture that we are all creating culture as we go, breath by breath, word by word, we're creating culture. So the way that I'm doing this thing, the way that I'm approaching this thing, the way that I'm speaking to this person, the way that I'm framing their challenge, is it contributing to the kind of culture that I want to be creating? Or is it just a thing that I'm parroting, or that was taught to me or told to me that I learned one time and I kind of internalized? Or am I missing a deeper truth that's worth acknowledging, even if it's scary and it means that my answer is that I don't have an answer, which is vulnerable, but more real than gripping onto the easy thing. And I think that's part of like skill building as a coach, which I can say after 15 years is like, there's so much skill building that's happened, but it requires humility, listening, acknowledging, I don't know, when the truth is, I don't know. And so I think that like recognizing we're culture building as we go real time, and therefore there's, to hold deep consideration around how we're being how we're speaking and what we're doing and how we're doing it as a question of like, am I contributing to the kind of culture that is collectivist, that is going to work for everyone? Or am I contributing to a kind of culture where it's just every person for themselves? Good luck.
Oh my gosh.
And then second, am I taking the resources that I have, money, time, energy, and circulating them? Because turns out I don't need that much right now just for me. But like, hey, they need, so I've got extra energy. I can give it to these people. I've got a bunch of money. Let's circulate it through my community. And so to me, this is part of how like we can both develop as individuals, as beings, in a way that serves the kind of world that the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And also a way that as an industry, we can have roots. We can have, we can be values aligned. We can be truly connecting to the kind of culture and contributing to the kind of culture that is going to move us in a good way. And I think the beautiful thing about most people who come into the coaching industry is there's this optimism. It's like there's a hope beyond hope, an unreasonable sort of visionary way that we're like, I think I can be part of making this whole thing better. You know, and of course there can be like delusions of grandeur that can come into that. But I think that for a lot of us, there's this like, okay, things are kind of messed up and we might be seeing particular ways that they're messed up. And we're like, I want to contribute to them being better in the particular ways that I can. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And then to make sure that as we go, we are actually fulfilling on that aim bit by bit, best that we can. He is like, that's the call.
Yeah. So well said. I feel like in the last few minutes, what I would really love to hear from each of you on is a prayer and a prescription. And I'll clarify, prayer is pretty clear, but prescription, I just mean for our industry, if there was like one call to action, one thing that someone can take away from today in terms of shifting something in their behavior, what would that be if you had to just succinctly? I know we've got a lot of things that we brought up today, but just in closing, I would love to offer that. So if you can just bring into space a prayer and a prescription.
I think from the vantage point of mother, a prayer would be for more of us to imagine that we have great grandbabies living on this planet, and actually to be motivated for them to be less self-centered and more self-centered and also less short-sighted and much more connected to the bigger vision and dream of an inhabitable planet that is not just inhabitable, but that is like socially livable, because we're not so self-centered. And then I think that would be the prayer. Prescription, similar vein, but you know, connected to what I was sharing, is to like really try to understand your place in the circle, kind of piggybacking on Nisha's piece around if you have less responsibility to be more responsible to others, to really look at where am I in the circle right now. And I think because our culture has makes it so that we all feel like we don't have enough, it's hard to really recognize like you're caring for less, because it's hard to just care for ourselves. And that's the truth. We can have compassion, but where are you holding less, and for whom can you hold a little more?
Thank you. I'm definitely taking that away from today's conversation. I was like, oh, okay, could work on that one a little.
Yeah, totally. You don't realize it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it. I look back at my maiden self, I'm like, oh man, you thought you knew.
Yeah, I'll say my prayer I feel is similar to yours, Rachel, which is that we hold devotion to a vision for the more beautiful world. And when I say the more beautiful world, to me, that's a world that works for all beings, and that we hold like devotion beyond what's reasonable to that. Come what may, come what may. And I think the prescription that I would offer is like to really notice, to cultivate and hold that discernment, to notice when something feels exciting, or like it could solve a problem temporarily, or it has like a sort of like, oh, I like this candy quality to it, versus when it feels like, oh, that resonates like truth. Like it drops me down into a bassy resonance of truth. And that as culture makers, which I feel like coaches or people in this broader industry are, we get to choose what we want to align with, what we want to be. And whether we want to both follow and be the sort of sugar high, this tastes good, like, ooh, it can get me out of my problems for just a minute, or help me forget them for just a minute, or the bassy resonance of truth, the orientation towards becoming elders. And I feel like as a coach, I can get rich for me, and that can be my aim. Or, yeah, take care of my family, make sure I got what I need for sure. But really, like the long game that I'm playing is I want to become elder. I want to be and become mentor to my community, supporter for my voice of reason, steady holder. And yeah, that'd be my prescription.
Thank you.
I think my prescription is that we, as an industry, remember that nothing that we as coaches could ever do could or should trump or try to trump each person's own inner guidance. And if we can be working on reminding people of that, supporting and reminding, then I think naturally the industry will shift out of a lot of the popularity contest competitiveness that it is, because naturally consumers, when we stand in the role of consumer, any of us, we will follow that piece within ourselves. Like you said it so beautifully, Nisha, of that looking for that resonant drum. And my prayer may we collectively as an industry, those of us standing in the work of this industry and those of us standing in the receiving of this industry, remember that at the foundation of it, the desire and the dream and the wish is for healing and returning to love. And may we always hold that as our North Star within ourselves, within our work, within our visioning, and within our community. May we see and understand, all of us in this industry, that our inherent greatness is powerful. And that when we remember it, we can use that inherent greatness to come home to love ourselves and to lovingly remind and call the people around us home to love in themselves. And that can ripple out into the world and have a greater positive impact than any one piece of thing that we create.
Thank you all so much for these beautiful prayers, for clear action steps, for your wisdom, for your time, especially with little ones around. For anyone who is watching or listening, there's bios either above or below this video. You can get more info on where to find these women. If you don't already follow them, make sure you do, because this is just what they give us on a daily basis. So again, thank you so much all for being here. And I know that I'm taking away so much as a maiden moving into motherhood.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you both.